And you are very bullish, very optimistic about Mr. Jolani and the possibility of establishing a Syria that, even though it comes from that ideological place, is stable, is reasonable, can make peace with Israel, for example. So how did you see that play out? And what do you think that tells us about, A, the future of Syria, B, how minorities can live in this world that you're describing as paternalistic and a lot more stable? And I agree with you. Every Israeli agrees with you. Better a Saudi Middle East than a Hamas Middle East or a, Iranian Middle East. How do you understand Syria right now?
Well, this is where I always used to say, basically that knowledge is burden. And, the more you know about the situation, especially when not only the surface, not just only the layer below the surface, but the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth layer below the surface. This is when it becomes a burden, because then you're saying things that are not obvious to others, and then people think what the hell? I mean, you are anti-Al-Qaeda, for God's sake, and you are, sympathizing with someone who swore an allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And it's calm down, boys. Because I know more than you do, way more than you do about this issue, not just from now, but from many years ago.
It's possible you even know more than me on this issue. I just want to say that officially for the record.
Yes.
A little bit more.
A little bit more.
What are we missing? What are we missing? First of all, he's very much impressed us that he put on a suit, but then again, there has been this massacre of the Alawites. There has been Christians fleeing. He did, when he was in charge of Idlib a few years back, forcibly convert, at least sort of publicly on paper as a stunt maybe, but it wasn't experienced as a stunt by those minorities, a Christian village and an Alawite village. How do I know if he's good or evil? Where do I look to find that out?
I think this is, in my opinion, one of the first, instance in history where you have the radical leader of a radical organization becoming de-radicalized and then starting de-radicalizing the top tier leadership and then going into the second tier leadership and the third tier leadership and, top down de-radicalization as opposed to, the other way around. And I was aware of it, I was completely made aware of it in a chance meeting in Berlin with one of the senior intelligence officers from the Five Eyes, in March of 2018. So I'm talking about a knowledge I have, basically extending more than 8 years. And we were talking specifically about Jolani and Idlib and what's happening there. And I was absolutely surprised that when I was taken into the confidence, of that senior intel officer, who was serving at that time, holding the Syria file at that time, and I was supplying him with information, and he said to me that actually, if you want to know, basically something that will, surprise you, Jolani has now completely switched to the American side. And that was, remember, March of 2018. Remember, 2018. And I said, how? He said, well, it's all started, when he was in Buka and then in other prisons, American jailers, were befriending him, and especially American librarian, the jail library and the jail librarians, were in particular impressed by how many books he was reading and the fact that he was starting to depart the idea of global jihad and thinking about jihad being a instrument to fight injustice rather than being a global aimless, jihad in a foreign empire. And then, of course, he comes out of prison 2011, straight away sent to Syria. He established, Jabhat al-Nusra there, even though it was funded by ISIS initially, but he was completely at odds with ISIS leadership about the direction of the group. He doesn't want Syria to be a staging ground for any terrorism against any other nation whatsoever, especially the Americans. And then, when the pressure was on him so much, in April of 2013, just before the split with ISIS happened, he went to the Turkish military intelligence and to Hakan Fidan in particular, and he just said, I don't want basically to be part of this. How do we extricate ourselves from this situation? And so this is when the split with ISIS happened. He managed to keep hold of about 40% of the group, kept them as a Nusra. 60% went with ISIS, but then what happened with ISIS. So what happened is, for the next several years, he was passing on to the Turks every single bit of intelligence on ISIS camps, weapon depots, location of their leaders, exact coordinates. So the Turks were passing it on to the Americans, drones, fighter jets, everything you can imagine, decimated ISIS. But then he, of course, when he left ISIS in order to remain legitimate in the eyes of his followers, he gave his allegiance to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda decided, oh, great, thank you so much. We're going to send now our own leaders to you. So they started sending people like Abu al-Faraj al-Masri and Abu Abdullah al-Muhajir and Ibrahim Siyasa and all of these leaders, only for them to be killed one after another by American drones. Somehow, someone, somewhere was leaking their, locations. Why? Because al-Jolani was leaking their locations to the Turks, and the Turks were giving it to the Americans, and then brownie points, one brownie point after another.
I'm assuming you've had interaction with the HTS, its leader, Ahmed al-Sharan, as he's known there. Have they been useful to fight, actually, terrorist groups like Daesh or Al-Qaeda? Have they collaborated with you and with Western officials to show that they're not terrorists anymore, but actually cooperate against terrorist groups?
Yes, indeed, to great extent. We've had excellent cooperation on sharing intelligence to fight against, especially Daesh leadership. But because they help us a lot. But because of the sensitivities, we didn't make it public that time. But over the years, they cooperated with us in providing intelligence on Daesh and Al-Qaeda related organizations.
Even high value targets, as
yes,
you know,
yes,
like
even,
al-Baghdadi or
even high value targets.
During the Trump years, Jolani reached out to Ambassador Jeffrey through intermediaries. Were you receiving messages from HTS? What were those messages?
Basically, we want to be your friend. We're not terrorists. We're just fighting Assad.
And so at some point, the Americans worked it out and told, in late 2017, they told Hakam Fidan, we know who your source is. We want to meet him. And so a meeting was arranged, and it was in January, just 2 months before I met that intelligence officer, in January of 2018. The meeting happened, and in that meeting, al-Jolani basically asserted that, I have no interest whatsoever in anything that is remotely related to global jihad. We despise, this idea completely, and we made sure that anyone who is trying to make Idlib a staging ground, for attacks against any other nation will meet his demise before he even achieve it. So he was asked the question, what do you want? And he said it exactly like this. He said, to rule Syria. That was what I was told in March of 2018. And so I was thinking that that was smart, but does, those around him know that? And the answer was, most of the first tier leadership know that, know his strategy. They have converted to that. They are now more or less similar to Saudi Wahhabist ideology of the nation state comes first. So, and they are doing that conversion slowly and gradually, from the top down. So in 2020, in July, that's another evidence of this, I met with a senior Syrian businessman who lives in the UAE. And I remember he had debts problems and everything and all of that. And he said to me, Ayman, finally, I'm going to pay my debts and I'm going to move to Turkey. Everything will be fine. I will tell you, I have the exact location of al-Jolani. He is quarantining for COVID. He is in this exact location, and he showed it to me. He showed me on the phone where Jolani is, and he had the proof of life. He had Jolani's video inside that house. And he said, I just passed it on to the Americans. It's only a matter of time before I collect a $10 million reward on him. I said to him, it's not going to happen. They're not going to target him, trust me. He said to me, no, what do you mean? I said, trust me, they are not going to target him. He's just too useful for them. And several days passed by, 10 days almost, and I called him. I said, my dear friend, no attack yet. He said, oh, those American bastards, they told me they put it all the way to the chain of command. At that time, it was President Trump, by the way. And it came back from the White House to the Department of Defense saying that that it doesn't serve the national security interests of the United States to target this man, even though there is $10 million reward on him. So
once it's on, you can't lift the reward, right? Because then you clarify that he's working for you. So they have to leave the reward, but then never act on it.
Exactly. The man mirrors my journey. Everything about him reminds me of me. Everything, every word he's saying, from Sayyid Qutb indoctrination all the way to the nation state and the Chicago Club and, infatuation with Milton Friedman. Yes, I'm not kidding, seriously. The man mirrors my journey. And so, however, I was, dismantling things from within. He was changing things from the top. Something that no one ever achieved before. So he has a difficult task here. And this is why I was enraged when I saw the Israelis attacking, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like, you should be working with this man, because this man is the guarantee that Syria is going to be radicalized for the next 20 years, not the other way around. Because he is the one who is making sure that radical people are either expelled or imprisoned. Look at the prisons of Idlib. How many people there from the jihadists, like who are Egyptians or Iraqis or whatever, who currently basically languishing in Idlib jails? Just like the jihadis in Saudi Arabia who are languishing in Saudi jails.
Right. In other words, in Idlib you have these jihadis and he's keeping a lid on them. And he can be trusted to do so.
He just like the monarchies, and he wants to be a monarch in the future. At some stage, basically, he wants to be the king of Syria, a united kingdom of Syria.
And I want everybody to understand something here. The Muhajirin here in Syria are calling for something, and they're calling for the right not to be droned by the Tahaluf or the coalition against ISIS. Oh, wait a minute. It's not against ISIS only now, is it? No, because 11 of the 13 people that were droned in 2025, they didn't have any connection to ISIS. Only 2 were said to have connections, and we can't even verify that they had that. Not only that, but you've got Muhajirin right now who are in prison. We're talking about Abu Shu'aib al-Misri, who was in prison previously, was tortured, had his feet whipped, and we understand had to have an operation on his feet. He came out of prison. He basically spoke that there were children in the Hayat Tahrir Sham prison, was rearrested, and we haven't seen or heard anything from him yet, and we still don't know his charge up until this moment in time. We've got Abu Yahya Jazairi. He was in prison back in 2020. It's now 2025. We're going into 2026. We still don't know what his charge is. We've got Abu Dujana, the Uzbek, who just a few months ago was imprisoned, and up until now, we have no idea why he was imprisoned. I'm saying this to say, brothers and sisters, that we have to have a due process. I mean, what was the point of the revolution if all that's going to happen is that whenever the government, either because they don't like the activities of certain people, which may not be a crime, or their backers, i.e. the Americans or even other than them, don't like a certain individual, they're called upon to arrest them arbitrarily, and they never ever see a judge. They never ever go to court.
أنا قعدت مع الجولاني، والجولاني حكى لي على كتيبة من الكتائب، قال لي هدول كفار. قلت له ليش؟ قال لي قعدوا مع جون كيري.
لا يدفعن أحدا منكم للانقياد خلف الغرب ومشاركته في حلف الشر الذي يسعون فيه للقضاء على جدوى الجهاد وتسخيركم لمشروع علماني أو تهجينكم مع النظام النصيري بتسوية سياسية بعد إنهاء المراحل الأولى من أهداف الحملة. ومن تعذر بدفع صيال جماعة الدولة أو غيرها فليقم بذلك دون أن يكون شريكا في التحالف الصليبي. قال تعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين.
وفي أي وقت جمال معروف أو غيره يعلن توبته ويقطع كل علاقاته مع الخارج، العلاقات التي فيها عمالة مع الأمريكان أو مع المخابرات السعودية أو مع مخابرات تابعة لدول أخرى، ويعلن توبته ويعود إلى أهله وإلى ناسه، فهو سيكون في هذا الوقت أخ لنا ندفع عنه ويدفع عنا ونستعين به ويستعين بنا على الحق والخير، لكن بشرط أن نكون نعمل تحت راية لا إله إلا الله لتحكيم شرع الله ولإقامة حكم الإسلامي في هذه الأرض، لا أن ننفذ أجندات الغرب.
أنا أقول لك بكل صراحة أخي نايف، وهذه أمانة تاريخية. أنا التقيت الأخ الرئيس أحمد الشرع في 2015 تقريبا في ريف حما، وكان أول لقاء لنا في ذلك اليوم الذي كان على ما أذكر كان يوم من أيام رمضان. وعندما سألته بأنك هل يعني أنت تؤيد هذه الأفكار التي تتناقل عنك، إن كانت قاعدة أو كانت سلفية جهادية أو كانت بين قوسين كما يدعوها البعض الوهابية، فيعلم الله أنه في ذلك اليوم قال لي: أنا لست مقتنعا بهذه الأفكار، ولكن نحن نقاتل هذه العصابة، وبالتالي نستطيع أن نغير هؤلاء الشباب تدريجيا. وهذا ما فعل من 2015 إلى 2025 خلال 10 سنوات.